Okay, I think we're live. So we're going to get ready to get going here in a second. One of the things I just want to do is just say, so this is the first session in what's going to be a Adventures in Middle-earth game, which is a hack for Dungeons & Dragons 5e. So I got a couple of players here, two of my players, and we're doing a little prologue, which will be an opportunity for them to potentially meet and then meet the other players. So without any ado, we're just going to get started. So the lone traveler is laying under a fallen tree, wrapped in a blanket, a horse tethered nearby. The morning is just starting to lighten the sky. Her night's been fitful. She's not slept well, troubled by dreams. She awakens to find her bedroll and blanket moistened by a very faint drizzle that is falling from the sky. You can see your horse. Now, how do you say your character's name, Taylor?
Moira.
Moira? Okay. Moira, about 10 feet away, you see your horse, and she's just pawing at the ground.
Moira kind of lifts her head. Psst. Sungold, cut it out. You're better behaved than that.
It is a she, right?
Mm-hmm.
She nickers a bit, stomps her hoof again into the now moist earth. You see that her ears are twitch and are kind of pulled back. She raises her head, and you see her nostrils flare.
Moira helped raise this horse. They almost have an unspoken language, and she sits up and looks around. Her hair is tangled and messy. She hasn't bothered to comb it. She looks like a vagabond just traveling on the road for however long it's been. She lost count of the days. But she trusts her horse. She looks to see. She smells the air, see if she can catch what scent has upset Sungold.
Yeah, the air is smells damp. It smells of earth and like rot, but not in a terrible sense, like when flesh rots, but in the sense it's the natural sense. You've actually made this camp in this small kind of this little outcropping of trees. You had seen the skies the day before, and you were afraid of rain, so you had found this shelter. Give me a perception check.
That is a 13.
13. Okay. So you hear like water dripping from the leaves falling to the ground. Your horse continues to paw at the earth, kind of rocking its head up and down. You notice its nostrils flared and its ears kind of erect and tilted. You listen You hear like the snap of a branch, and then nothing.
Moira's hand goes to the sword laying on her side, or laying next to her. It's been decently wrapped up to keep it dry in case of rain. And she pulls herself to her feet, and with the sword in one hand, she gently strokes Sungold's nose. Shh. Shh.
Yes. So as you rise from your where you were laying, and you walk up to your horse to soothe her. You hear the snapping of branches, and there's an explosion of mud and leaves as this large brown form explodes from the underbrush and charges towards you. Um, you have a split second to react, and let's roll initiative.
$15 for me.
Okay. Yeah, so this large hairy brown form is charging out from the underbrush at you. You can react first.
Moira spins and sees it coming and puts both hands on the hilt of her sword, and as it charges, she tries to drive the sword into it and send it off to the side away from her horse. That's a 14 to hit.
Yes, yeah, you definitely it's not a graceful stroke, but you drive the blade across the beast.
That's only 4 damage though.
Yeah. So the matted brown fur of this looks to be some wild pig. Offers it some protection from your blade. And as you kind of drive it aside with your sword, it turns its head, and you notice these yellowed tusks protruding from its mouth, and it tries to drive them across your thigh. Okay, that'll be a 15.
Yeah, that is a hit.
Okay. So it drives in, and you feel the clothing tear, and you feel blood to start to run down your leg. You take 2 points of slashing damage, and you have to give me a DC 11 strength check.
Yes.
Okay, so it as it barrels past you and drives this tusk across you, you're able to shift your feet so you're not knocked to the ground. What do you want to do? It's your turn.
You would see Moira as it comes past. She bends a little. It hits her in the left leg, and that leg gives way slightly, but she's able to counterbalance. And she heaves the sword around and tries to cut across its back as it goes past, and does so quite successfully. Ooh, 14 damage that time.
Oh, nice. Yeah, you cut this beast down, and it as it's running past you and maybe starting to turn a bit, and it just kind of nosedives and drives into the mud. Its legs kick for a second before it goes still.
Moira's chest is heaving, and she's got a bead of sweat on her brow. Pigs. I hate bloody pigs. And she looks down at her leg where it's just got this nasty gash. And she looks between her leg and the yellowed tusks and just shakes her head.
Yeah, the injury burns. You do the best you can to clean it out. And it's only then that you hear the nicker of another horse. You can hear the jingle of metal. It would seem that someone is making their way up the north-south road. You being just having situated yourself just off of it. What would you like to do?
Moira will wipe away the tear that might have leaked out as she tried to clean and bind the wound, and kind of using her horse as a crutch, she'll limp her way up to the road just to have a look.
So you see a lone rider. He's making his way slowly. He doesn't seem to have any sense of haste across the... being someone from the Rohirrim, you're very quick at able to maybe measuring horse flesh at a fairly fine steed. Nick, how do you say your character's name?
Orodreth, though I imagine
Orodreth.
in other regions they might say Orodreth. Like I think Rohan, they would pronounce it Orodreth.
Orodreth. So Orodreth, describe for Moira what she sees.
The pace of the rider is slowed due to consternation, it seems. It's got one hand up, like warding off the morning glare, and the other holding this like long, thin spear over his shoulder. He's got a white, black tabardry that's like flapping loosely, and there's like a pack that jingles this promise of metal heaped up on the saddlebags on the back of his dappled grey mare. You see him like look to the ground nearby his horse, like peering over, and then up again further up the road, and his body language kind of freezes as he sees an armed person yonder across the road. He puts his left hand down from his brow to ward off the sun and grabs hold of the reins and gathers up his horse and urges her on slower. Doesn't lower the spear, but tightens his grip upon it. As he comes closer, you'd see a lad of, a man, I should say, of 18 years, tall and gaunt, pale-skinned, sweaty and dirty, with a light fuzz growing on the sides of his jaw. Hail and well met, maiden of the road.
Well met. A fine horse you have.
And you, he says with a smile.
She smiles. This almost smug look, because she knows that however good his horse might be, hers is better. And you'd see her, and her face is young, but it's impossible to put an age on it. Her eyes are older than her face. But she's certainly no older than you.
I've been traipsing along the side of this road since some hours before dawn. I've been hunting boar, yet the beast has eluded me yet again, I fear. Failure deep in his voice.
It has not eluded me, Hunter. It's down yonder. Just down the bank. Dead, I might add.
His shoulders slump a little at that as he raises his brow and one eyebrow, and you could hear, as he's fairly close by now, I'd say, that of his stomach, and he kind of musters up control of his facial expressions and says, "Oh, my congratulations then to the winner of the spoils. You and your party must be hail hunters indeed. The great boar has eluded me for many days. Not even the speed of Nithni here could catch him, and he'll pat down at the flanks of the horse that he's on, and she'll give like a jink of her bridle.
When you mention the party, her feet shift a little bit and her eyes dart away. And there's only myself. And the boar is far too much for myself alone. You are welcome to share in it.
Oh, I thank you, maiden, he says. Though, forgive me, I have nothing myself to offer. It's been a couple of days now since my own stores dried up, and coin is useless in the wilds, he says, though I'd happily pay you for some of your boar, and would happily break my fast with you. I am Orodreth, son of Deerhile.
I am Moira.
And he waits like maybe an awkward millisecond too long for more than just your first name, and then he'll kind of put his lips together and nod. Oh, well met. And he'll give his best attempt at like a bow from atop Nithni. He'll kind of nudge her forward to go close to you and dismount. And I think even though he's got a terrible passive perception, I think by now he would notice your leg is bleeding, and worry would come across his face. You're wounded.
The boar was quick. I was not as quick as I'd hoped. I am fine.
He peers down to the wound as you say that and does not share the same attitude that you are fine, and says, a boar's tusks are a filthy thing. A fever will come from that wound, he says. If you allow me, I would take a look at it.
Her shoulders stiffen, but she is fully aware of the truth in your words. Perhaps after we've broken fast.
Frowns, but he is your guest the way he sees it, and will do as you wish. And then look up from the wound and smile and say, of course, I'm hungry, I must admit.
So you guys are both. It's a welcome thing. This boar that was slain by Moira, because both of you had been several days without a good meal. So even with this dismal drizzle, you're able to find dry enough wood to get a fire going. You cut up this boar and are able to eat. And as you're finishing this meal, I imagine it's in maybe some silence with maybe a little bit of small talk. What then would you guys do?
I try and find some water puddling about, the cleanest that I can find, and boil it. And I'll take out my the bladder I've got at my side with like the last mouthful or two of wine from Dornilla, and that like kept me, slaked my thirst upon the road. With the last thought for how sweet the sucker would have been, he will pour it in, bring it to boil, and begin like dabbing at the boar slash on Moira's leg, and take like tear a piece off his probably not the cloak that he wears, but like his spare clothing or underclothing, and like boil it too, and make a bandage to wrap around the wound. He's no surgeon though, and it's a pitiful attempt if you've ever been like healed by someone skillful before, but it's better than nothing. And he'll advise you to like rest upon it and not certain of his handiwork.
Thank you, Orodreth. You can see that the whole time she's not said much during your ministrations, but just quietly formed one fist and then the other. Trying not to let any rogue noises escape. Although you can see it's quite painful.
You are brave, Moira, he says. From where do you hail?
Here and there. And yourself? You have the bearing of Gondor.
There's like a slight wince at that. You were close, he says, from the mark. I'm from Dol Amroth. My father's house can be found at Dorn Erin, near where the prince resides. I'm from those lands, but a quest bid me by my brother and lord, Salafan, sees me here, north from home, on a fool's errand. And that he'll kind of like rinse his hand of like the water and wine and stuff and kind of turn away from Moira's gaze. Kind of like at the weather and his lot.
Better to have an errand than to wander with no purpose. Even if you think it a fool's errand.
You sound like my father, he says, and then you see like the slightest like dour look come over his face at the mention of that, as if it like brings back painful reveries. He shakes them off with practice, and looks back to you and gives like a mostly truthful smile.
I assure you, I am no one's father.
He laughs at that.
What is your errand, if I might ask?
He looks out to the rain.
Did we just lose him?
I was just gonna say he looks out to the rain and we lose him.
Suspense.
There he goes. He goes back.
And drops from the call.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
The suspense is killing me.
He says, I seek the Horn of Anserinae, a relic from the last age, an elf gift to my people, from times when our two kin were closer than they are now. And you can like see that he's looking west.
Does such a thing still exist?
My father thought so. Who can say if my brother does, though he has bid me find it? No one has seen it for hundreds of years.
The needle in the haystack.
So give me a perception roll, Orodreth.
$17.
So the question that I would have, Moira, or Moira, would be, what would he see? How would he see? Not what you're saying, but how you're acting as you guys are sitting through this breakfast. He's tending your wound, and you guys are having this kind of almost very guarded conversation.
Oh, it's a tough one.
So would he see you as someone that's like uncomfortable, maybe looking over your shoulder, getting your stuff together as you're talking with him? Like, are you comfortable with him being there? Are you comfortable with the questions?
She's seems mostly at ease, although she keeps a close eye to her horse. And if he walks behind her, her head swivels to follow him. She's not uncomfortable with his questions, but she shuts them down when they become personal. Gives a short answer, if any at all, and then deflects or just lets the awkward silence hang.
So time passes. The drizzle has it's basically stopped. You can still hear the dripping of water from the leaves and the trees that surround you. The sky itself is still like a steely gray. The sun, which is now fully risen, is very muted. You can see it kind of glowing behind the clouds. And you can feel there's still there's kind of a damp chill in the air. It would be early spring in Middle Earth. So the ground itself is at places still very, very soupy, very muddy. What is it you guys will do? It's kind of I guess it's that point where you've eaten, you've had some small talk, you've butchered this boar, and I'm assuming you guys would kind of rolled and packed it as best you could, maybe putting it in any saddlebags that you possess, and you've probably prepared your horse. Now, how do you say your horse's name?
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. I think Orodreth would comment on your horse Moira and ask for its name, for her name.
In the common tongue, it is Sungold.
And in the true tongue of her name?
Isfael.
Isfael, he says, like savoring the word. This is Nithni, he points behind him to his dappled grey. Her name is Elven, it means kisses, and like she'll like nudge him at that like a bit harder than he would like on the shoulder. And then he'll give a smile as if like with a bit of rouge in his cheeks, like, see what I mean? And like she'll chomp at the bit, like hates being wet standing around here, the smell of blood and fire.
There's a genuine laugh at that interaction, and a real smile across her face.
There's still some of the line of the elven horses from when our races were closer in the last age that flows through her veins, and others of the stock of my prince. I do not know much, but I do know horses, and Sungold is no southern horse flesh, nor elven. The name Isfael is not one I've heard before.
She is from Rohan. And Moira looks down at her gear, which is very obviously Rohirrim. And she goes, and you are no fool. You might have guessed I am as well. Or I was.
No southern maiden handles a horse so fine as one from the mark. So I've been told, but never had the privilege to see. I mark you for one of Rohan, of the Horse Lords. You are far from home. Then again, he looks around at the steel grey sky and like the miserable day. And so am I.
Well, I have not much of a home anymore. It's a long story that I'd prefer not to say, but I am a rover, a wanderer for now.
Well, Moira of the Mark, he says, I'm glad you wonder. Me, he says, like leaning back against the rotted stump. I'm going to head further north towards Bree. Maybe a warm room and some proper fodder for Nithni.
Moira just kind of lifts her shoulders and drops them again. My way is there also, if you would not mind the company.
If you would not mind me eating half your pork, he says with like a cheeky, youthful grin.
She chuckles, and you eat as much as you eat a lot. And the smile's gone.
Perfect. So having gotten through the awkward meeting, you two, you mount up and you continue back on the north-south road, heading north to Bree. So a question for you, Orodreth. Would you mention to her that you're actually going to Tharbad in search of that horn, which lies between where you are at and Bree? Or
I think because he's young, he wouldn't be able to like handle well silence. So if they like head in the same direction upon the road, he would like talk about it. The more silent Moira is, the more he'll like talk about his like errand or his past or anything useless, even just to fill in the silence. So he would mention, like elaborate upon his errand, and that he had heard word from travelers a week back that the men of Bree in the age past picked clean the battlefields of Tharbad. Perhaps a relic lost there might be found further towards Bree. And that was his rationale for heading there, and he'd like pass that along to her the further they went down the road.
Yeah. So the north-south road used to be this great royal thoroughfare that went between the kingdoms of Arnor and Gondor. It has now since started to fall into ruin. As you guys are riding along, you can see the cobbled stone. Many of them starting to get overgrown, weeds growing up in between them. But it's still traveled enough that it keeps most of nature at bay. Travelers are few on this thoroughfare, which was once highly traveled between these two great kingdoms. And by your best estimates, it would be you have it's about 3 days to Tharbad, so in that time you continue to deplete your stores of pig, and the weather does turn around and ends with much warmer and sunnier days when Tharbad comes into view on the end of the 3rd day. You can see it. What was once a great crossroad town has now been diminished itself. You can still see these ramshackle buildings that probably at one point were quite extravagant, how now started to fall into ruin. You can see lights through in several of the windows, and there's this wall, but it's more of a picketed wall surrounds the proper of this town. But what you can see is there's a rudimentary gate has been put up with a small little gateway building. And as you guys approach, this man comes out holding a lantern aloft. He's old and grizzled. You would guess his knuckles are all like swollen, with all arthritic. And he yells out, who rides the North Road?
I am Orodreth, son of Deerhal of Dol Amroth.
Dol Amroth, eh? You've traveled a long way, friend. What's your business here? And Tharbad.
I'm wandering through, he says, and he'll give like a smile to Moira that the lantern bearer can't see.
Yeah. So he's a short man, kind of stooped over with age. But you think even in his youth, he probably couldn't have been much taller than like 5.5 feet. He strains up with the lantern and he says, "And you then, lass?"
His traveling companion.
You see his brows kind of knit together, and he says, "Traveling companion, eh?"
And she points to her sword. I'm his bodyguard.
He has to swallow like indignation at this point.
Yeah, I was going to say this gatekeeper kind of as, and he looks kind of to you, Orodreth, and back to you, Moira. And he's like, "Well, it's none of my business. You're not going to cause any trouble." And you hear a jingle of keys as he goes over and unlocks this door, this gateway that leads into the town. And he pushes the doors open for you. "All good day to you then."
And to you, sir, he says, smiling, and he'll like nudge Nithni onwards.
Moira just tilts her head at him and gives him a little nod. Gatekeeper?
Yeah. So much like the north-south road, the streets of Tharbad have fallen to disrepair. Refuse and trash are just abound. You don't see much in the way of its inhabitants, but you can hear them and you can see evidence of it from the houses you pass. You see a shutter open. You see a curtain pulled aside. But the town itself, even for as early evening hour, is fairly quiet. What is it you guys would want to do?
If I can catch one of the locals about, I would ask them for an inn of repute.
Okay. That's probably something you would just ask this gatekeeper. Maybe as you pass through the gate, and he's getting ready to close it and secure it again. He says, "If it were me, then I would go to the Crazy Ox," and he would give you directions. He would say, go down third left on.
Thank you, he'll say. He'll smile and he'll thumb 1 copper piece to the old man.
He catches it in one of his gnarled hands, and he kind of looks at you, and you see this wry smile on his face. Certainly the man probably would have given you the information for free, but he's happy that you rewarded him with the copper. He gives you a nice curt nod, and he goes and he looks at your bodyguard again, and you notice his smile broaden, really showing his almost toothless mouth. And you guys would go along your way.
Moira, like when they're going by, she goes, "See? Nobility."
Perfect. He just kind of harumps as you do that. "I don't know me the ways of you Southerners," and you would hear the clicking and locking as he secures the gate. So as you draw closer to the Crazy Ox, you can start to hear the sounds of the inhabitants of this town. You see light kind of like pouring out onto the street from an open door in front of this squat 1-story building. You see a sign hanging over it, and got a picture of a carved ox, but it's doing something you wouldn't expect an ox to do. What might that be?
I've never seen an ox juggle before, I'll say, with like...
So that's what it is. It's an ox standing on its hind quarters, and it's got these carved three blue balls, and it seems to be juggling them. And so you identify this as the crazy ox. You see a couple of patrons standing outside. They seem to be in conversation and smoking pipes. One of them turns and looks and gives you a nod as you guys ride up.
Well met, grandfather, he'll say with like a broad smile.
You would hear a grumble from the man that looks at you, and he turns back to his friends.
Your pipeweed smells delicious, Orodreth will say as he like swings down from the saddle. The road has seen my pipe empty for some days. I'd barter for you some with pork, not a couple of days old and well smoked.
The man turns back to you. He looks to be maybe of middle age. His hair kind of tucked out, sticking out from underneath like a cloth and a simple wool cap. He kind of stops. He kind of squints and looks you up and down, probably measuring whether or not you're someone that could pay. He says, smoked meat, you say?
Freshly caught by a fine hunter. Butchered with care.
You'll be the hunter then? And he's still looking at you, Orodreth.
No, he'll shake his head after a moment's pause. One much better than I.
Moira is struggling to keep a straight face.
Yeah. You hear one of the guys behind him say, "Come on, Oswin, just give him some." And he'll kind of give him a shove, and he'll kind of swat back at one of these other men, and he reaches down and he produces a small pouch of pipe weed, and he measures some out for you.
I'll go to the saddlebags.
He goes, "Suppose you'll be wanting to use my pipe too, huh?"
I'm not one of those guys. No, I'll pull out like a fine bone pipe from my saddlebags along with the last of the pork. I'm sure we're sick of it by now anyway. And since we're in a town and we'll have coin, we can get something different. So I'll hand over the last of it wrapped up to him as I like stuff my own pipe, and then put the leftovers in a belt pouch, and I like raise it up to him and nod a thanks.
Yeah.
Though I will take a light.
Yeah. Yeah. So he would geez, wonder how they lit pipes back then.
You get it like a taper? You get a taper, and then you like dab where you've stuffed your baccy in.
Yeah, so that's what he does. He kind of, in that same pouch, he pulls out this it's like a little is it like a straw or a stick? And he lights it with his pipe, and then you use it to light yours.
After I take like the first beautiful puff of smoke, I'll like turn back to our horses and say, "We seek a fine establishment where our horses can be cared for and well fed, and ourselves rested from the road. We've heard this is the place. Would you agree?"
He says, "One of the best places in Tharbad to get a good drink, and an almost as good meal." And he'll turn and he'll toss the wrapped pork to one of his friends. And he says, "Your horse is there," and he's pointing at your horses with the stem of his pipe. And he says, "You can stable them down the street there."
I'll look down to where he points and make note of it.
Yeah. Yeah, you see it's probably good, but maybe about 100 yards or 100 meters down the road. And then he kind of takes the stem of his pipe. He kind of taps his forehead. It's maybe it's a regional kind of a acknowledgement. And he turns back to his friends, and they start engaged back in their whatever conversation they were having before your arrival.
You'll walk over to Moira. Well, there's stables down there which may suit our steeds, he says, with like not too much enthusiasm given the kind of dank feel of the town. But better than the road.
Better than the road, although I'll trust no hostler with sun gold. I'll do it myself.
Well, come, let us see to our horses first, and then ourselves. I know the place, and I'll lead Moira towards where the old men give me directions to.
Perfect. Yeah, so you guys stable your horses and return to the Crazy Ox. And you guys can interrupt me at any time if there's something that you would do. The stable looks fine. It's clean. You see that actually when you get there, there's like a boy, maybe of his mid, maybe 11, 12 years old, and he's tossing down fresh straw. And there's another boy, maybe of 14, that's forking the straw into stalls. So seems to be a fairly thing. It's 4 copper to stable your horse for the night. And that
I'll hand over the coin for both of us, given that he's like knightly and trying to impress a lady of the mark. When he sees like Moira taking to her horse and like cleaning it in a different fashion to what he's used to, he'll probably be like doing that look over the shoulder to see and then like alter his own way of doing it. Like when you're next to someone who's superior at you at a certain task and you like copy them. Yeah, he'll do
She
that.
pretends not to notice.
He doesn't even notice it. She pretends not to notice.
Perfect. Yeah. And sometime later, you find yourself seated within the Crazy Ox. It's welcoming. It's warm. It's a mixture of meads and ales, the burning wood that's in a large hearth, foods that the smells just waft out from a back kitchen. But the tap room itself, but there's also the odor too that kind of mingles into is the smell of like body odor, and the room itself, the tap room is fairly full. There's probably about 20 to 30 guests there. No, you found that. It doesn't appear that it's your wound. Your leg aches, but you've been checking it. We're 3 days in, so every day you've been checking it, and it seems to be healing okay. And so one of these servers that's kind of milling through the crowd approaches your table. And asks, "Can I get you something to drink then?" Yeah. And it's a soft-spoken, I was gonna say boy, but it's more of a young man, probably just a few years older than you, Orodreth.
I will have a cup of mead for myself, and then he'll just pause and look to Moira.
The same.
2 cups of ale and some cheese.
Yeah. So he disappears in a few minutes. He's gone for several minutes, and when he returns, he sets down 2 tumblers of mead and or probably tankards, tumblers. That'd be too small. 2 tankards of mead, and he sets down a flat, round platter, and it has cheese and some bread on it. He says, "New to Tharbad, are you?"
I am.
I take it you don't get many travelers if we're that easy to spot.
He smiles. He says, you sort of stand out. And he kind of, you see him eyeing the young knight. And then, and as you look around the room, it's mostly locals here. You don't see much in the way. You probably see one or two other people that you would probably mark as some sort of merchant of some sort, just because their clothes are pretty well tailored and cut. Traveling north?
Perhaps Orodreth will say, taking a sip of his ale. But I've business here.
Oh. He kind of leans in close to you and he goes, I know quite a bit. Don't let my youth fool you. I hear a lot. Maybe I could help you. Well, if the price was right.
He looks to the young man, trying to take measure of him, engaging his trustworthiness. And since I'm young and naive, he's like certain that the the man is trustworthy. And he says,
"You could definitely give me an insight if you wanted, though, rather than just
going off my passive."
Yeah.
Okay. Worse than my passive.
Okay.
9.
What is your passive insight?
11.
Oh yeah, yeah. He seems pretty trustworthy to you. Probably would earn whatever coin you gave him for the information that he has.
Yeah. My good man, he'll say.
Moira, you could definitely do it as well if you're watching the conversation in any fashion.
Oh, she absolutely is.
Yeah, I figured she would.
17.
17. Yeah, he seems like. I mean, you're not certain if it's hard to know if he's lying because Orodreth hasn't kind of mentioned anything for information yet, but it seems like he's sincere. As long as he's getting paid.
I'll continue and say, my forebear lost something of value here some time ago. I want to retrieve it. I fear I'll need the help of someone who knows this land well and has more years under their belt than this table. Someone who knows things. If you could put me into contact with someone like this, well, I'd happily return the favor.
And he says, what sort of item are you looking for? And he kind of just almost, it seems like he's just doing it out of, he reaches down with this cloth and he just starts wiping the table. And you easily pick up that he's making it look like he's working.
I'll grab the hunting horn from my own belt and put it on the table and say, a hunting horn, not too dissimilar from this. I don't know if the guy would notice it, but Moira would definitely notice the slight wince as Orodreth says that this fabled horn that's elven made that he seeks is similar to this one. How could it be? But he doesn't want to give all of that information away at once to a stranger.
A horn, you say? He's still wiping the table, but you see him kind of look. You could see, he purses his lips. He goes, well, his Lord Seaway, he's a pretty smart man. I bet he knows. He probably knows about that horn. He's easy to find. He's in the great longhouse. Center of town.
Lord Seaway, you say?
Yeah, he's like the Lord around here. Since.
Since what?
Well, since the last Lord.
What happened to the last one?
He went crazy. Touched by the shadow, they said. I don't believe any of that nonsense, but needless, he went crazy, and Lord Seaway, he was his son of shells, so it seemed more natural that he would be next in line.
What's Moira's passive perception?
14.
You see Orodreth become uncomfortable as at the last statement of like the young man wiping the table between us, and he tries to like hide it, like this pained look, and there's like he kind of sinks back into himself and takes his eye contact and confidence away from the man to like an errant kind of splinter or wood or like a bit of dirt in his thumbnail or something. Well, like, thank you, young man, he says, even though the guy's older than him. And he'll like pull out 5 copper pieces from his belt pouch and slide them across the table to where he's wiping at.
You see the man's eyes get really big, and he quickly kind of just uses the cloth to push the coins into his open hand. He says, Lord Seaway, he doesn't take audiences. You'll have to wait till morning.
He is a lord. I'll look to Moira like he must see us. And then I'll realize what I'm saying by that, and I'll kind of busy myself by taking too much of a gulp of ale.
Morning is fine. We need a rest anyhow.
Yeah, you probably do feel that way. You're both fairly exhausted. Even though you find spots here and there along the road to camp or sleep through the night, your sleep, Moira, has been very restless of late. You've been troubled by dreams visiting you, which has prevented you from getting a good night's rest. And for you, Orodreth, nothing matches the comfort that you're used to, that you left so many weeks ago. So you guys probably both fairly excited at the prospect of sleeping in a warm bed.
Absolutely. I think Orodreth would have been used to hunting, in inverted commas, being like servants beating the bushes and like kennelsmen with hounds, like bringing down the animal for the nobles to come in at the end and finish it off. And like camping for him, it was like squires setting up his bedroll and tent. So now he finds camping and hunting like a brutal, arduous, painstaking process that he's nowhere near as good at as he thought he was, given like the comforts that he illusioned himself with.
Yeah. So you guys are snacking, nibbling at this cheese, which you find to be fairly dry. It's almost crumbles as you cut off pieces of it, and the bread seems a bit stale, but the mead is good, or you ale. And you're probably about halfway in your cup when a man you see someone walks up to your table. You recognize it as the man that you had met outside Oswin. And he says, Lord, pardon me, but I couldn't help but overhear you, and you're looking for a horn then.
Moira rolls her eyes at the couldn't help but overhear you.
Yeah, it's very obvious. You know, with your passive insight, that he was eavesdropping, seeing a lord enter the tavern.
Seeing Moira's demeanor towards the man, it's like he gets a flashback memory to seeing his father rule before his own insanity took him to suicide. And he remembers him always keeping around a gruff knight who would be like the bad cop to his good cop in situations like this. So he'll like extend out a seat for the man and gesture for the table wiper to bring him an ale as well. And I'll be all like smile and roses while Moira rolls her eyes around her head and clenches her knuckles.
Yes, perfect. Maybe probably fingering the hilt of her broadsword.
Dagger, yeah.
he smiles at you and takes the seat. He looks over at you, Moira, gives you a friendly nod and a warm smile. He says, also saw you paid the lad. Now, I'm not thinking that, but I also heard he said, Lord Seaway, the man's a fool. You'd be wasting your time.
At that, Orodreth will like puff at his chest and purse his lips and then exasperatedly say, "You would speak so of your own lord?" As if this guy's just taking a shit in his chainmail.
Yes.
Moira has leaned back and crossed her arms and is just looking, it's just giving this guy a glare. Like, really? Really? Really?
He kind of panics for a second. He takes a quick gulp of his ale, and he's like, he wipes his with the back of his hand. He wipes his mouth, and he's like, "Oh, I no disrespect intended at all, Lord. It's just us common folk. We aren't so flowery with our language and whatnot. It would be a waste of your time, and I was more concerned about that. If I misspoke by all, I am most." And he just kind of mumbles on, and he grabs his cup again, and he takes another drink. Just trying to. It's like that, like a Mars moment, where and then he puts his cup down. He goes, but anyways, he won't know nothing about that horn. You would just wait hours. I'm telling you, hours before he'd even see you, just to find out that he don't know nothing. But here's the thing. My family, we've been living in Tharbad for many generations, and I know people. And he kind of gets in close, and he whispers that to you, and gives you a wink. Like one of those knowing winks. I know people.
I'll lean in, the smile slowly receding from my face, and I'll say, "What people?"
People that know stuff. Know stuff about stuff that might be valuable, if you know what I mean. Sounds like that horn. Now, not that I was listening. Just happened to overhear. Sounds like that horn might be pretty valuable.
You sure craned your neck a lot for someone who just happened to overhear.
Well, I was just walking by, and I just happened to catch it. And the Lord was so nice to me, and that pig was really good. My lads and I really enjoyed it, and yeah, I was just naturally curious, is all.
I'm going to roll insight on this guy, I think, now.
Yeah.
Crit. So
Nice.
21.
He is so, he's like, his eyes are kind of darting around. You've noticed that he's like biting the bottom part of his lip as he's talking. Yeah, he's so full of it. He was listening to you the whole time.
My eyes are going to level, and as much seriousness as like a disproportionately gangly 18-year-old knight wannabe can muster, I'll lean into the man and say, with as much thunder as I can, "You best level and speak truth to me, friend, or I'll hold you before your lord for the treason you just spouted earlier."
And you see his face just bleach. What do you want to know? Yes. I was listening. I was listening the whole time. We don't get many of your like around here too often, and I was just interested. I was curious.
I'm going to speak with Lord Seaway one way or another tomorrow morning. You've got till then to bring these people you speak of, or any information that might help me. What you bring me may change what I say to Lord Seaway.
Well, I can't bring it. I can't bring her to you.
Then he puts he raises up one lip while keeping the other just where it is and shrugs his shoulders.
Well, I can't bring her to you because she's just too old. He's whispering and he's kind of like leaning in closer to you.
I'll look to Moira, alluding to me feeling out of my depth here and like seeking her scrutiny of this man and his words.
Yeah, she's been sitting back with her arms crossed, just letting Orodreth go for it. And she watches the mannerisms change with the threat of treason hanging over his head. And can't bring her to you, she's just too old. And she remembers one of the grandmothers of the village where she grew up, who walked around the hills until she couldn't walk anymore, and then sat by the fire for days on end. She kind of nods. How far is she?
She's on the outskirts of town. Wenvild, they call her. They say she's been old for as long as I can remember. Very wise woman. A lot of people go to her for stuff, even Lord Seaway. And he's still kind of whispering. Well, not whispering, but he's definitely lowered his voice, maybe so others don't hear what he's saying.
I'm going to reach into my pouch and pull out 5 more coppers and like let him see the flash of them.
Oh, you see, like, the thing where he bites his bottom lip. You're actually concerned that he might bite through his lip when he sees that money.
I'll gesture for the table wiper and I'll pay for this Oswin's ale with the money that I just flashed at him.
It's only 3 copper for the cheese, bread, and ales.
The 2 copper that's left over in my hand, I'll hand to him. I'll just make a note of all this copper that I'm bleeding, and I'll say the rest after I've spoken to Wenvild, and I'll drain my mug.
He's like, if you got more of that, they're shiny. I can take you there right now. They say the crone doesn't sleep. She's too old. She doesn't need to sleep no more.
I'll set down my cup. He knows, like from training, that he shouldn't not act so eager, but he can't help himself. This is the first like proper anything he's had since this full Aaron came onto him. So
both of you guys
give him away.
Yeah, both of you guys can definitely give an insight check. I mean, this guy's done enough shady stuff that I think you both would kind of measure his words and his actions.
I got a 5 this time.
Okay, I got a 5 too.
That's okay. So just remember, you can't actually roll lower than your passive. So,
oh, really?
Yeah. I heard of Mike Merle's piece the other day, and the passive is actually
that makes so much sense when you're concentrating. Yeah. How could you be dumber than when you're like not?
Okay, right. 12.
Yeah, so
11.
It seems like he seems to be pretty honest. He's not like doing all the tells. The only time you saw him bite his lip was when he saw the coin. that seemed to be something that was a trigger for him. But other than that, it seems like he's pretty honest about this Venvild, this old woman, this old crone.
Moira sees Orodreth's eagerness and kind of clears her throat and sets her cup down and says to the man, "Come back in an hour when we've eaten. We're in no hurry."
Orodreth will like swallow down the last remnants of ale that was in his mouth at that and try and calm himself and then act congenial and agree. Of course, yes. Even though he doesn't.
Yeah, he would smile and within the hour then. And there's probably that awkward moment, like he's kind of sitting there like, well, do I sit here while they're eating? And he kind of looks and then he pushes
Moira
back.
Stands up first.
I was gonna say.
I'll shoot up straight away out of propriety, like when the lady stands, the gentlemen stand up as well.
Yeah, and this guy Oswin seems a bit perplexed as to why you're both leaving.
I'll make a slight broom motion to the door so that Moira can't see for his own benefit. Like, you should leave.
Moira gives Orodreth a slightly quizzical look, and then heads over to find someone and orders stew or roast or whatever happens to be on the menu for the night.
Perfect. Yeah.
As long as it's not roast pork.
Yes. Well, stroke of luck. We just came into some possession of some roast pork. No. Yeah, it's just a stew. It's a lentils and some sort of meat that is not pork. You would guess it's maybe some sort of some sort of beef. Yeah, definitely turnips. No, it's definitely not a waterfowl. It's probably some raised animal. You did pass a few small little towns on the way. I mean, farms on the way in. Though it was really hard to see them. There was in dusk. But yeah, so they bring this hearty stew out, and it's actually fairly good. You're rubbing your leg, Moira, as you're kind of eating. Legs still stiff, the injury still a reminder of your encounter with the boar. And you finish your meal. What do you guys would like to do now? Well, actually, maybe we should take a quick little break.
Okay.
If folks are cool.
I was going to ask if we could. I'm going to go to the little boys' room, so that'll be perfect.
Yeah. All right, awesome. So let's be back in like 5-ish minutes.
Sounds good.
All right, great. Okay, so you guys finish your meal. You guys finish your meal, and you notice that there's still several patrons within the Crazy Ox, but and Oswin would have said when he departed that he would wait for you outside to bring you to Wenvid.
Yeah, I think it'd be hard for Orodreth to hide his eagerness, so he'd be like putting his plate and drink to the side and looking ready.
Maybe you should just go. It's not my place.
What if I'm accosted, he'll say. Without my bodyguard. With a smile. Of course, he says, the road's been long. It is my task to fulfill. I've been thankful for the company. And he'll like hand over a little iron key for the room that is for one of the two rooms that he's hired for the evening. My thanks. I'll return.
Yeah, inspiration, by the way, for the little joke there about the bodyguard. As you walk out into the evening air, you look up at the sky and it's starry. The clouds having cleared away sometime in the early evening. The air is cool, and you even get like this slight breeze comes in Orodreth that doesn't quite have that stink upon it that you noticed earlier as you were making your way through this town. Oswin sees you come out. He's kind of sitting on this overturned barrel, and he hops up to his feet, taps out a pipe that he was smoking. He says, "Oh, thought you got lost in there," and he smiles at you. So he kind of looks over past you and he says, "The lady won't be coming with us?"
The lady has her own business, he'll say, in like a little bit maybe too much of a harsh or dismissive tone to the man.
Thought you guys traveled together, but okay. He would start walking down the road. It's in the same direction that the stable, where you guys stabled your horses. And what he begins to lead you down several streets, the whole time talking to you, pointing out things. "Oh, that's where Master Tinneth lives. He is one of the finest blacksmiths. Well, till the horse kicked him." And so it's kind of those sorts of things as he's walking along. You could definitely ask him any questions that you would want, and he would say. So one question that it would stand out to you, Orodreth, it would be, he'd say, "So what's your plan when you get that horn? Is there anything special?"
Well, to blow it, of course, he'll say, as if it's self-explanatory, but it's a weak, deflective answer. But he'll like quickly begin speaking after he says that and say, "You mentioned the old Lord Seaway went mad. Tell me more of this." He kind of looks over his shoulder a bit, just like instinctively, and a bit more comfortable talking about this sensitive subject. And now that Moira's not here to see how keenly interested he is in it.
So he's like, "Yeah, it was the strangest thing. Wasn't much older than me. He was, never heard of anyone going crazy like that. It came on sudden, like. It's a darkness about him. I mean, now." And he would stop at this and he would turn to face you. You guys are like standing in the middle of this throughway. And he's like, "Now, It's not like I saw the Lord much, you know. Likes of me and all. Lords don't usually have much time for simple folk. But, it's the strangest thing. Heard whispers I did, though.
As Oswin's been telling him this, he's just been lost in his own flashback of his own father Deerhurl's demise and similar circumstances. While the man narrates it, he sees the imagery of his past. So when he kind of stops and leans in and says the end of it, it shakes Orodreth from his reverie. He leans in. Yes, a lord should make an effort to be close to his people. A sad tale. I trust the new Lord Seaway is more hale.
Seems to be. Just man.
Yet you claimed he would not help me, that he could not, that he was a fool. As he even says that, he says it like he's spitting out poison or the remnants of puke.
Well, he's not like our old lord. Old lord seemed to, get things like figures and such. Is making the town good again. I'm sure you've noticed it's a bit run down. Streets.
Yeah, he'll step over a collapsed, suspicious pile of debris as the man says that, and he'll kind of give it a sidelong wary glance, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, he's he goes, Lord Seaway, he's just different. And he's struggling to find the word, but it's outside of his lexicon. And probably the best he's going to do is what had happened in the Crazy Ox. But though he would clarify and say he probably just doesn't know about the horn, is what he would basically would surmise to.
Mm-hmm.
So he continues to lead you down this tunnel. He goes, "We're almost there," and we'll flash over to the Crazy Ox. Moira, it's been some time now since the young lord has left, leaving you alone in this tap room with the other patrons. What, if anything, would you be doing or not while you're waiting good Lord Orodreth's return?
Moira's mostly listening, and she's trying to determine who's the biggest gossip. And see who's the one that talks the most, that knows the most names, and who's the one to be listening to.
Yeah, perfect. So you hear a lot of really innocuous stuff, that probably means very little to you, not being from Tharbad. So you quickly dismiss that. So why don't you give me a I guess it would be an investigation. Oh, perception or investigation. Let's do a perception first. See if you catch something, and then we'll do investigation to see if you can get more.
Perception is 14.
Okay. And then give me an investigation.
Investigation is 15.
Perfect. So a couple of things that you hear, so even though it seems like Oswin was trying to be quiet when he was talking to the young lord, several of these other patrons seem to have overheard parts of their conversation. You hear a couple of them talking about Lord Seaway. And one of the things you hear them say, one of the patrons say, "Yeah, I'm telling you that Lord Seaway poisoned him." And then you hear another man quickly hush him. "Don't say that. You know what happened to the last one that was found saying that? He was hung in the street, remember?" And another thing that you would hear too, and this is several minutes after you've done this, you hear someone say, "Yeah, and I don't believe that young lord with Oswin." And then you hear another one kind of chuckle, and he goes, "Yep, probably the last time you'll see him."
Moira's been listening intently, trying to keep her posture relaxed as she leans back in the chair. But at that last bit, the hair on the back of her neck stands up. And she can't help herself. She looks over to see who said it.
Yeah, you see a group of men. One of them you recognize from the three men. The two men that were sitting, they were out there with Oswin when you guys first arrived. And they all, and right after they say that, the men sitting start to chuckle.
Like they're kidding or like they're malevolent?
Malevolent.
That was what I was thinking.
It's like it's like the inside joke, and they all get it.
She'll try and catch the eye of the young guy who was serving everybody.
Yeah.
And
he darts around, and when you kind of give him like this little like nod, he trots over to the table. He goes, he looks down at your almost still full cup of ale, and he's like, "You want another drink then?"
No.
He looks nervous.
Give me a round for that table there. And she points to the men.
And he looks over the table and he reads in. He leans into you and says, "You sure you want to buy them drinks?" And he looks really nervous. You know, his eyes are kind of like darting around, and you know that cloth that he was wiping tables down, he's kind of like wringing it with his hands as he's talking to you, kind of down at his waist.
Yes, very sure.
Ooh, okay. He looks over to the empty seat where Orodreth was, and he says, "You left, huh?"
Just get the drinks.
Okay. And you see him depart. And a few minutes later, he comes back, and you see him walk up to the table, and you can't hear what he's saying, but you hear him kind of talking to the men. And one of them kind of looks past him at you. And I don't know why I don't have a camera on, so I don't know why I'm acting it out. But
I'm acting out too.
Me too.
Good. I think we're in good company then. So he kind of looks out past this young serving lad, and he kind of gives you a smile and a nod as he's setting the cups down.
I raise my cup to him.
Yeah. So he would take the cup that he was finishing, and he would raise it to you. And he would say something to the men that are sitting at the table, and they would all laugh. But you can't quite hear what he said.
I'll walk over and pull up a chair next to him.
You can't help but feel like I guess maybe Moira wouldn't feel this way. I was going to say like a sheep sitting down in a wolf den. She slew a boar on her own, so she might not be a sheep, but maybe a wolf sitting down amongst other wolves is. Yes, Nick, right?
Yeah, she's feeling a little nervous, but she's trying to play it off. The serving guy will see that her demeanor has changed pretty significantly, and she pulls up the chair and does that like kind of turn it around backwards and then sort of straddle it.
Yes, yeah, I got it. So this man, one of the men that was outside with Oswin, the one that raised his cup to you, he says, "Thank you for the drink." And he's got this coy smile on his face as he's saying it.
Well, I suppose I should be thanking your companion for getting that whelp off my hands for a little while. Little lordling.
Yeah, he's done that for sure. And he chuckles, and the other men chuckle. The other three men at the table chuckle as well.
Her smile is forced, but she's still like.
One of the other men says, "Oh yeah, that lordling won't be bothering you again." And then the gentleman that that you've seen before kind of shoots him this look, and he stops.
She takes a big swig and she goes, "Good, I've been babysitting him for better part of a week." But where's he off to? I can't have any blame on me.
Well, Oswin told me he's taking her to see Wenvild.
Yeah, some sort of witch?
No. She's just an old woman. Lives outside of town. And as he's saying that, the other three men they're chuckling again.
She's looking at them like they're idiots. And an old woman is useful how?
Well, she knows stuff. She lived a long time.
So she'll offer him a cup of something and I won't have to deal with him anymore?
Well, if he sees her.
I can live with that. She'll take another drink and try and not look as nervous as she feels.
As you take the sip, he goes, a couple of the men say, "Thank you for the drink."
You're welcome, lads. I like to make myself at home in a new place.
So the original man, he introduces himself. He goes, "My name's Gunnar. You gonna be staying long here in Tharbad?"
It depends on the lordling.
I'll tell you this then. Don't trust Oswin.
Oh, but I should trust you. I saw you sharing a smoke outside. How's that helpful?
I have to live here. Just because I share a smoke doesn't mean I trust a man.
Well, just because I share a drink doesn't mean I trust a man.
He kind of gives you a nod that basically says, "Touché." As you look over your shoulder, maybe at one of those awkward pauses in this conversation with Gunnar, you see the boy, the serving boy, and he's just kind of like looking over at the table where you're sitting. He's continuing to he's kind of shifting from foot to foot, and he still has that worried look on his face. When he sees you look over at him, he immediately averts his eyes a different direction, and gets to looking busy.
Yeah, she'll drink with the guys a decent amount of time before excusing herself and catching that fellow's eye maybe as she's leaving the table.
Perfect. And that's, I think, when we'll shift scene as you're rising from the table, saying you're from Gunnar and his mates. We switch back to Orodreth and Oswin. He's been leading you through these streets. for several minutes now. You would say probably the better part of like maybe 10, 15 minutes. And are you keeping track of your path? Or you
No, I
trying
think
to?
because I'd only be trying to avoid like stepping in stuff that would soil me.
Okay.
I'd be confident that this man would be like taking me back after the meeting to where I came from, so I wouldn't be worried about trying to find my way back
Okay.
or orientate myself. But he did like gesture to where the woman was out on the outskirts of town earlier, and as long as like where he's taking me is loosely like paralleling that, then
Yeah.
I'd just be
Yeah.
like, oh yes, indeed. Oh, that's where Lord Timoth, Maester Timoth lives. Oh, very good. And like when he points out some ruin, like I'm like very interested in it, more like imagining the history of it than like its current dank state. But yeah, I'm in the grip of his hand.
Yeah. So he leads you down a few more streets, and then he turns a corner. He says, "We're almost there, Lord." And he's kind of his pace has picked up a bit, and so he's actually walking a few paces ahead of you now. He's looking over his shoulder back at you. He says, "We're almost there, Lord," and he kind of just trots ahead of you. And he turns another corner just ahead of you.
I think I'd like grow wary at this stage, and I'd yell out to him, Oswin, where are you going? I do not know the way.
And you hear like kind of a response from around that corner, down another side street. You hear him say, "Almost there, Lord."
Yeah, I'll hasten to catch up with him.
Yeah. So you turn around this corner, and it's a very narrow. It's not, to call it a street would not be an accurate term. It's kind of more of an alleyway. And you can see just it's very shadowed, even though there's light cast by the moon. And you can see the shadowed form of Oswin as he's kind of walking down this alleyway. Off in the distance, you can see that it opens up onto another street, probably about 30 or 40 feet. And you see him kind of wave over. It's like, "I'm almost there. It's just right over there." And you can see he kind of points.
I'll duck under a low awning and like slip in like some of the slick mud and like right myself and catch up to him as quickly as I can to peer where he's pointing.
Yeah. So when you get there, you're standing up next to him. He pointing. You're probably about 10 feet from the alleyway now, and he says, "Right over there." And you look, and he's pointing to this rather dilapidated. To call it a house would be. It's a shack. It's dark. The windows are unshuttered, but there's just pits of darkness in each of them. The door is kind of askew and off its hinge. And then he turns to you and smiles. He says, "Go to make a confession. That's not where Wenville lives." And he says, "Come on, lads." He yells. As he yells that out, you see some shadowed forms appear at either end of the alleyway.
My father always said, treat good luck as an enemy. I was a fool. And he like goes to draw his blade.
Yeah. And the minute you reach for your sword, you see the glint of moonlight on sharpened, well, maybe not sharpened, but dull daggers. We will roll initiative. All right. You will act first, Orodreth. You get a sense that these men were not thinking that you would fight. So there's 5 of them. There's Oswin and 4 others, 2 at either end of the alleyway. So Oswin is right in front of you, and the others will probably be are about 30 feet away from you.
You men of Tharbad, stay your hands and do not wish to do you violence. let me forgive you now, and us go in peace, and sow no more shadow over this dark land. I warn you, I'm trained by the nephew of princes of the south, and in my hands hold well-forged steel, lethal to the touch. Will use it against you if I must. They would not seek to do murder in this horrible place now. And he's like, there's half pleading, half warning in the voice as he says that to them. If they still seem resolute to violence, he'll behead Oswin.
Yeah. So Oswin you see him, he's holding this dagger, its blade pitted with rust. And he says, well, we don't want no violence either. You just hand over your coin and we'll be on our way. No one has to get hurt here. And you would know by Oswin's stance that he looks like he knows how to use that knife in his hand. You're not so certain about the others, though.
I'm going to use my interaction then to grab my belt pouch and throw it down before me.
Perfect. Oswin smiles and he goes, "So I'd like to see a lordling with some sense in his head." And he kind of looks.
I'll ready my action to behead him when he touches it.
Perfect. He smiles and looks at either end of the alleyway to the men and reaches down to grab the pouch.
Okay. Two-handed crit.
Yes. Just tell me how you do it. Don't roll damage because you crit him.
Well, it was 11 if it mattered. I rolled pretty pitifully. But
So,
just like a clean strike to the nape of the neck as he goes to bend down, and at least his last thought will be one of happiness or maybe greed. But
yeah. So you strike his head right from his shoulders. It hits the alleyway. You can hear the gas from the men on either end as you behead Oswin, and there's like that momentary pause. So you could, so they're kind of staggered by that. They didn't expect you to do that.
I'm going to rush forward. He had a dagger, right?
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to rush these men after grabbing the knife from his twitching hands.
Yes.
I'm not going to wield it in two hands. I'm going to wield knife in one hand, longsword in the other. And I'm going to slash out at the first and try and strike the one next to him for my bonus action and search. Okay, so with the longsword strike, it will be a 17 to hit. And for the dagger strike, 11.
Yeah. So how much did you do on the sword?
Did the dagger hit for an 11 to hit? I would assume
no.
not.
Yeah, that one's kind of you hear it, you drive it into the guy's midsection. You feel it some resistance as it kind of moves across some hide armor.
Yeah, so I only do 6 slashing damage for the strike that hit as I rushed up into the. I'm not adjacent to them. I'm long and tall and gaunt, even though I'm only very young. So I have the long reach feature of my kin. So I'm actually standing 5 feet from the guy that I thrust the longsword at, and adjacent to the guy I stabbed at but missed with the dagger.
Perfect. Yeah. So the one you cut with your sword, he kind of staggers back, coming out of the stupor from seeing Oswin slain. And but it's not fast enough. And you hear behind you, the splashing of footsteps as the men at the other end of the alley are running towards you. The man closest to you, when you tried to drive the dagger in, tries to give you, in turn, drive a dagger into you. He rolls a nat 1. So he slips on a paving stone and falls prone. You hear the clatter of his dagger as it goes loose from his hand. So he is prone. and the other one, the one that you cut, is going to attack you. You can tell, you could see the fear in his face. He was expecting that you weren't going to put up a fight. And so does he hit you with a 16?
That hits. I am not wearing my armor. I would not have worn my armor to dinner, so it's definitely a hit.
Okay. So he hits you for 4 piercing damage. And it's a very undisciplined strike. It's like almost like he turns his head to the side, not looking at you, but he still finds purchase. And you notice his hand is shaking as he does so he doesn't quite drive it in as deep as he wanted. And the other 2 men come running up behind you, and they have to use a dash to close the distance. So you're now surrounded by these 4 men.
Unlucky them.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, when you grab that, just quickly, when you grab that dagger up off the ground, did you grab your purse too?
Nope. I could only
Okay.
grab the one I assumed.
Let me do. I might retcon something here real quick. Let me just make this roll. Okay, so you're surrounded by 3 men as one of the others that was running down the hall skids to a stop next to Oswin's body, looks down, and seeing still clutched in his headless dead hand is your pouch of coin. He reaches down, he grabs it, pulls it free, turns tail, and starts running back down the alleyway. His friend, of course, has not seen this. So you're now surrounded by 3 of these men.
Am I able to long reach opportunity of attack him as he retreats from?
No, he's further down. He's about 15 feet down the alleyway. So you probably would not even notice it.
Okay.
Not yet, anyways. So it is now your turn again.
Going to drop the dagger and reach back and connect my other hand to the double-handed kind of posture on my sword and slash out at the one who's prone.
Oh, yes.
Him as well.
Yeah, advantage. So you see him scrambling. He's kind of like almost on all fours, scrambling to try to get to his dagger as you come upon him.
16 to hit.
Oh, yes.
The better of the 2. Okay. That's 10 on the D10. That's going to be 15 neck damage.
It's not as clean a cut as you did with Oswin. It's kind of a little, it's askew. So you cut down through his neck and into his shoulder. So his head kind of tilts off to the side as he just starts twitching on the ground. And let me see. I'm going to do a little cool roll here. The one you wounded just says, "The hell with this," and he turns to run, and the other one stands there. So you get an opportunity. You can have an opportunity attack against him.
Yeah, that's going to be 21 to hit.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely hit, I would assume.
Yes.
I get to re-roll that because it's a 2 and I took Great Weapon Fighter. So 10 again. So 15 slashing damage.
Yeah. You cut him down as he turns to run, just leaving you now facing this one assailant who lunges at you with a dagger for 16 so 20. So
that hits for sure.
And so it grazes across your rib cage for 3 piercing damage, and
I'm bloodied.
So he uses that strike to hopefully take you off guard, and then he runs past you down the alleyway to get away. So he's going to go his full 30 movement, 30 feet, and it is now your turn.
I'm going to second wind and chase after him and cut his head off for a 15 to hit.
Yep, that'll hit.
Okay. That's a 1. I reroll that. It's a 2. So 7 slashing damage for this guy.
Yeah. Yeah, you cut into him, and you see the blood spatter onto the ground. It's a worthy strike. And he is so you're going to get an opportunity. No, he's going to disengage. No, let me see. He's going to run for his life. So you would get an opportunity attack as he's going to try to dash, so he can run the full.
13 to hit.
Yeah. So you just miss
Okay.
him as he, I guess the fear of death has given him speed, and he starts.
Oh, I'll use
some
my
distance.
inspiration, if I may.
You may.
The inspiration you gave me earlier?
Yep.
Yeah, 17 to hit.
You hit.
Okay. That's going to be 13 slashing damage.
Yeah, you take this other assailant down. There's a grunt, and then he's silenced as his body hits the ground just outside of the alleyway in the main street. You would look if you were to look either way, you would not see anything. No witness of this this attack. You suspect that Oswin led you to a almost abandoned part of town. And it would probably be shortly after this that you would realize your purse has been stolen, taken by one of the other men. What would you like to do now?
Follow the only boot prints that lead out of here. Get my money back.
All right. So switching back to the Crazy Ox, you rise from your seat. Gunner gives you a head nod, thanking you again for your company and the drink, and as do his friends. And you make your way over to the boy.
I clear my throat to make him look at me.
He kind of gives you a smile, and he says, "How may I help you, lady?"
You're smart, you have ears, you're paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
Where would Oswin have taken Orodreth?
He kind of looks down at his hands that are holding the cloth, and he says, I knew I should have said something sooner. Your friend's probably already dead. Oswin, he likes to take advantage of travelers through town, and he usually leads them off to a burned out section where no one lives no more, and usually asks them to give them their money, and most of them do, but I'm afraid your lord friend might fight back, and Oswin's got friends.
Can you take me there? Or at least point me in the right direction. Something. Please.
Give me a persuasion roll.
I'll jingle my purse.
There you go. You with advantage. You jingle your purse.
Oh, with advantage, that's a crit.
He goes, oh, all right, but it's only because I should have said something sooner. I never should have let the Lord. He was kind.
Stop talking and start walking.
Okay. So he just yells something to the back kitchens, something along the lines of, "I'll be right back," and he leads you out into the street and starts leading you through the town.
She's going to push him to like a quick pace where they're almost jogging.
Yep. Yeah, well, he's almost jogging too.
Good.
And you, within minutes, you come across, oh my gosh, I totally spacing on your name, Nick, sorry.
Orodreth.
Orodreth. You find Orodreth. He's still holding, are you still holding your sword in your hand?
No? Both.
Yeah.
Yeah, in both hands, trying to find this person who's robbed me.
Yeah, so you see Orodreth. He's stalking. Probably stalking is probably the appropriate term. And you see it. His sword is slicked with blood.
Orodreth.
Oh, my lady, you should not go back there. It is not seemly for a maiden. And he's kind of like sweating and half in shock. He's like never actually killed a guy, let alone that many before.
You're hurt. What happened?
I am robbed, deceived.
I shouldn't have let you go alone. I knew better than to trust anybody. Come. Oh, that wound looks terrible. I've got to see to it.
More the rust and filth of the blade than the truth of the strike, he'll say, looking down at his like ripped and soiled like tabard, stained with blood. That probably makes it actually look worse than it is. I mean, after my second wind, I'm back to full hit points, but with like blood seeps through clothing, it makes something look like more grievous than it is. So, and the world's a little spinning a little bit, I guess, with the shock of it all. But he'll say, "No, the only money left to me, I'm ruined without it. I must." And he kind of looks around, blinking, trying to think of where the guy could have come next.
Yeah,
I guess his eyes.
Give me an insight roll, Orodreth.
19 on the die, so that gives me a 20 all up.
So you're sitting there, you're standing there with your bodyguard and the young serving boy, who just looks totally shocked that, one, you're still alive, and two, what do your attackers look like, as he sees the blood on your sword. But then as you start to calm a bit, as you're talking to Moira, you realize you're not going to probably find this guy that got away.
I don't think I am, but I think this weasel-faced table wiper before me might be able to. And with the blood on my swords and still like the sweat and the heat up, I'll say to him with eyes leveled, You know these men. Where would they have gone with my coin?
He kind of takes a couple of steps back, and he kind of, his eyes dart over to you, Moira. What? And he kind of he stumbles backwards and puts his hands up defensively. Not that it would do much good against your sword. He's. I don't know.
Roger, leave him be. He wouldn't know where they've gone, I don't think. He's been some help to me.
What he's doing and like feels ashamed of himself and kind of like unpuffs his chest, but he can't bring himself to say sorry.
If there's anyone you want to interrogate, it's a lot inside.
He'll look to where Moira points and begin walking in that direction.
Yeah, so you slowly make your way back to the Crazy Ox. Your side aches where the daggers had cut you. Later on, as you're pulling off your tabard and undershirt, truly, the blood made the cuts look much worse. They're a lot shallower than you had first thought. What is it you guys would want to do?
I would want to ask Moira about this lot that she says might know something about my robbers, and I'd want to get a recap of her like interaction with them as we head towards the juggling ox. And before I go in, I'd bid Moira go around the back and enter that way.
Okay. Yeah, she'd kind of give you the Spark Notes version and then head round back.
Okay.
And I'll enter from the front.
Yeah, so when you enter, you get a couple of looks. You see at one table of men, there's a look of surprise across the table, seeing you walk into the Crazy Ox. They kind of their heads all kind of turn into each other as they're talking, and one of the men, one you would recognize from earlier this evening out front with Oswin, kind of gives you a approving nod and kind of raises his cup to you.
I'm told that you men know and keep the company of the thieves who have just robbed me in yonder alley and left me bloodied, like many travellers to Tharbad before me. And he'll take a step forward at that, hand on the hilt of his blade. I've taken silver and copper that belongs to me, and I would know where this person has taken it. I warn you, I have little patience for those who would think to steal and do murder.
Gunnar raises a hand up to you. He says, "Easy now, friend. Just because I smoked a pipe with Oswin doesn't mean I kept with him. You ask him."
I cannot, for he is dead, and all but one of his fell coterie, the one whose face most resembles a weasel, is the one who grubbed my coin. Need to find him. You men will help me.
One of the guys whispers into Gunnar's ear, and you see Gunnar nodding as he whispers, "Sounds like Alric. He's a coward."
A rich coward at the present.
Give me a persuasion roll.
I'll give you an intimidation roll.
You can give me an intimidation roll.
I'm not very good at persuasion. 14.
All right. I usually don't get involved in these things. Gunnar stands up, pushing away from the table. And he looks at the three guys that are kind of just looking at him like, "What are you doing?" And he goes, Don't let nobody take my seat." And he reaches down, and you didn't notice this before, but he reaches down and he grabs this axe that was resting up alongside the table. And he kind of tosses it over his right shoulder, and he says, "Guess we'll go find Alric." And so rather than role-playing all that out, so he leads you to a different section of town, and he points to this with his axe. He points to this little small hut. You can see slivers of light through the shutters, and I'm imagining. So, Moira, are you going this time?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I figured it.
Absolutely.
So
I think I'll just wait out the front a little bit just till Moira comes back around. I'll just in case any of those guys slinked out the back
right.
to like go and alert anyone or anything. I'd wait for Moira to accompany us.
Yeah. So Gunnar points with the head of his axe towards that small building. He says, "That's where you'll find him." And just as he says that, you hear this kind of crashing sound inside the small hut.
That's where we'll find him. Come, and I'll trudge towards the hut, expecting this Gunnar to follow.
He does, but he kind of is at the rear. He's just kind of walking behind. He kind of has a walk of someone like, "I can't believe I'm doing this. What's going to happen to my reputation?" But yeah, he's following you.
Yeah, I'll move up to the hut, kick the door in, and step inside.
Yeah.
I'll go around the back in case there happens to be a back door.
Yeah, it's not a very big building. Hut. It's probably about the footprint is probably about 15 by 20. So you easily get around to the back about the time that you hear this crash of wood. Give me an athletics check, Orodreth.
Okay. 18 on the die, so
That's
13.
perfect. Yeah, it's not a very sturdy door.
23.
There's just an explosion of wood as it splinters at the latch and swings and slams against the wall in this small hovel. You see a man kind of crouch down, and you see him hurriedly throwing things into a sack. A small candle is lighting this room. It's a one-room place, and he just kind of starts up and turns to you, and you see the weasel-faced man.
Halt, Alric.
And you see on a nearby cot, you see the pouch of coin. You see his eyes dart over to it, then dart back over to you, and then you see his eyes dart to the rear door of this hovel. You can almost see the calculations working. Like, can I grab that bag of coin and get out that door before he can close the distance?
Like
and
algebra,
then he says,
Tolkien script fading across the screen.
Yeah, he's totally like, he's like, oh, he goes, they made me do it. They made me do it. I was gonna return your coin.
I'm gonna walk over and grab the coin and affix it back to my belt.
The minute you start to walk, he lunges for the coin purse, and he turns and starts to run for the back door.
Poor guy.
Moira is kind of like holding the door shut with one arm.
Perfect.
And she's just, because she's waiting for him to make the escape. She's been listening, and she has no doubt that he's going to try and run, because he already seems to be a coward.
Yeah. So let's roll initiative, Orodreth, just to see who acts first, see if he gets to the door before you get to him.
Okay. It's probably going to be me. I got a 19 on the dice. That gives me a 19 all up.
He snatches the purse and turns and is almost to the door as you catch up to him.
I'm not going to catch up to him. I'm going to like stand back and let him run out the back door and see what Moira has.
Because you know Moira's out there. Perfect. So he gets to the door, and let's do an opposed athletics, because you're holding the door closed.
I'm going to hold it for like a good 2 seconds and then let it go when he's pulling really strong.
Okay. Perfect. I'll give him a dex save then. So he does that. You see him pulling it. He's pulling, he's tugging it, and then he finally gets it open. The door slams into his face, and he falls to the floor. Your coin purse flies out of his hand and hits the floor.
Moira leans in through the open door. Oh, pleasure to make your acquaintance.
Yeah, this Weasley-faced Alaric looks up at you. You see just the sheer terror on his face as he looks at you, and then he looks up over at his shoulder at where Orodreth is.
I'll draw my sword and point it to his Adam's apple as it like bobs up and down, and say, "You're going to help me see Lord Seaway early. Come on."
Okay. I imagine there's a lot of pleading for his life in the early as you take this guy prisoner, and you retrieve your coin, and it's all there. So how do you intend to? We'll drop out of scene. So how do you intend to use Alaric to help you get an audience with Lord Seaway?
I'm going to march him up to the longhouse while I'm still bloodied by the daggers of his associates. Can't remember the correct word for like the criminals who help you, but and demand, since I'm like of Dol Amroth and of a noble line, albeit small, demand audience with this king in reparations for crimes done against me by this man.
Okay. Yeah. So Gunnar, who was kind of reticent to go with you, now when he hears your plan to go to the longhouse, you see this broad smile come across. It's a very toothy smile, and he says, "I'm glad I came." And he's following you along. And or anything that you're doing, Moira?
Oh, I'm just following along, fingers drumming on the hilt of the sword.
Yeah, perfect. So the longhouse comes up into view. You see a couple of the Lord's men just standing outside of the longhouse, kind of leaning against spears. Uh, as you approach, they kind of stand more at attention, and one of them yells out, "Halt! What's your business?"
This wretched man assaulted me with several of his now dead associates who tried to rob and do murder unto me. I found him in his hovel with my own coin. I have 2 witnesses to testify to my story and would seek the judgment of the Lord yonder, as this is of urgency. And then I'll introduce myself as Orodreth, son of Dirhal of Dol Amroth, and I'll pull from my bloody tabard a silver brooch of a swan and hold it aloft as proof of my words.
And so the guard that had stepped forward says, "The Lord's in bed."
Then I shall see him at the bed and hear his judgment there, and I'll take a step forward.
You see them kind of tense their. Give me an intimidation roll if you're going to press.
Gladly. I bet you I fucking botch the shit out of this.
Moira, you would
17 on the die, so
17, nice.
20
Yeah.
all up.
The one that stepped forward kind of pauses for a second, looks over his shoulder at the other one, and the other one kind of does one of these like the kind of like the shrug, and he's like, all right. And both of these guards would lead you inside. The whole time, Alaric is just sniveling. He's given up pleading. He's just like sniveling. So Moira, one of the things that you would see is that when Orodreth said that, you saw Gunnar nodding his head when he said that he had 2 witnesses. So he leads you into this long hall, and it's much like every long hall that you have seen. Very, very reminiscent of the long halls from your homeland, Moira. But this is much grander. In the rear, there's like a raised dais that the Lord would sit. You see some sheep and goats tucked off in the side, and off in the bit you can see a curtain off in the distance where more likely than not the Lord's chamber is. One of the guards says, "Warm yourself by the fire. I will get our Lord." And he looks at his friend as in kind of like, all right, but keep an eye on these guys. And he retreats to the rear of the longhouse and disappears behind the curtain.
Since we've got a moment alone, I'll grab this cur by the cuff of his collar and like drag him in close and ask him, who is Venville and is she even real?
Venville is real. She's an old crone. She lives on the outskirts of town. And again, his voice is shaky. I didn't have it in my voice, but his voice is shaky. He's just terrified.
What is the punishment in Tharbad for thieves?
Lord, they'll cut off my hand.
Moira opens her mouth as a particularly unladylike comment crosses her mind, and then thinks better of it.
So as you're asking that, you hear a raised voice, or not clear to understand it, and then the curtain quickly gets pressed aside quickly, and a man in his long clothes steps out. He's kind of askew is this iron crown, not bedecked with any sort of stone or anything. And he steps forward. He goes, "I'm Lord Seaway, who wakes me when I sleep."
Forgive me, Lord Seaway. I'm Orodreth, son of Dirhal of Dol Amroth. and I wake you to give you news of grievous crimes by your folk against me.
He kind of looks at you, and he's just as tall, probably 6.5 feet tall, almost like a bear. He's got a thick build. He looks at the guard behind him, and then he looks back at you, and he says, "This could not wait till morning."
I'll gesture to my wounds and the bloody tabardry and say, no, it could not.
He kind of falls down in the seat on the dais, and he kind of rubs his forehead, and then with his other hand, he waves you all forward.
I can't help myself at the seeing this man. I'll have to comment and say any man who wears a crown should expect that he may have to wake in the evening to see to his duties. And it's like derision aimed his way, because not even the Prince of Dol Amroth wears like a crown like this around, and the kings of Gondor have like fallen to stewards now, and they don't wear crowns. And for this man of this like dilapidated town to wear a crown is just like rankles Orodreth, I think.
Yeah, I guess to call it a crown would be not fully accurate. It's more like a band of iron, but it's kind of got this it's kind of twisted at the front to give it to break the circle,
like a peak. Yep.
Yeah, like a peak. So yeah, it's a symbol of his office, but yeah, it's a crown. He definitely sees himself as lordling of this free town. So he waves you forward.
Yeah, I'll give him the recap of the events. I'll mention that Oswin was treasonous and spoke ill of his lord when I'd said that I'd intended to speak to him of this horn that I've been seeking. So I'll bring that to his attention all at once as well.
Right.
I'll say that this man Alric can testify that I was attacked and tried to be murdered and robbed by those men. I assume he'll want to help to like save his own skin.
Yes.
Condemn them.
Alaric quickly regales the Lord with the tale, but of course he talks about how he was pressed into service, and it was only through coercion that he had done it, and that he tries to say, and you can react to this any way you would like, either one of you. He says, "My intention was to return the coin, and actually, when the Lord came upon me, I was preparing to do that."
Was that before or after you tried to flee out the back door?
Well, I thought he was going to strike me dead before I had a chance.
I still may yet, as is my right, and then I'll turn back to the Lord to see what he has to say on the matter.
He's just kind of like, elbow on the arm of the chair, on his cheek, and he's like, "Take him away." And you retrieved your money. No, you shouldn't say money. What was yours was returned. You retrieved it.
Yes.
Well, then it's good then. As is our way, he will lose a hand.
He's already a useless coward. If you take his hand, you will make him twice the criminal he already is.
He kind of sits up at that, kind of perplexed. He said, "Well, what would you have me do then, young lordling?"
Hang him.
Moira's mouth opens slightly. She was not expecting such almost ruthlessness.
Oh, that's awesome. In her way, she sees like it's more ruthless to cut his hand off, and leave him as a cripple, like a criminal cripple.
Right.
he thinks it's torture. So it's cool that there's that duality going on there, that we both think those methods are like brutal. But yeah, he would say like hang him, as if like you would say like shoot him. You know, when there's a cow with a broken leg in a ditch, you like he says hang him in the same way that you like one farmer would say to the other cow, shoot him.
The Lord turns to the guard that's standing beside his chair, and the guard leans in and he whispers something to him, and the guard moves along down the longhouse.
Before the guard disappears, I'll say to the Lord, or you could forgive him and teach him a better way. It is the duty of a Lord, no, to lead his people, not just maim them.
Right. The minute you say that, Alaric is like, yeah, I could learn a better way. I'm not without skills. My mom and pa, they were farmers, and the Lord says, he's now smiling, and he says, if it is your will, Lord, that I should forgive this man, and it was you that suffered the hurt, then yes, we will find him and put him to better use. And you see the guard that he had spoken to stop, and he looks at him and says, take him, and we'll find a better purpose for him. And the guard leads Alaric out, and the whole time he's being kind of taken and dragged out. He's like, thank you, Lord, and he's got snot running down his the side of his face, and that's the last thing you hear as he's brought out of the longhouse. And Lord Seaway stands up and he says, so the business is done then, so you'll not bother my sleep.
Not completely, my lord. Apologies, but since I have your attention, and from what I hear it is hard to gather, I would speak to you now and not take up any more of your time further on down the road.
Well, out with it then.
Osmond lied to me many times, and when he spoke that you were a useless fool and that you would not be able to help me in my endeavor, well, perhaps that was a lie too. I seek the Horn of Anserinae, a long-lost heirloom given to my folk by the elves of the West. I would return it to its rightful place amongst the mantles of the princes of Dol Amroth, and wonder who better to talk to than the Lord of Tharbad itself, the site of the very battle where this artifact was lost, to try and recover it again.
His chest kind of puffs up a bit when you mention what Oswin had said about him, as you attack his hubris, and
assault brutally.
Yeah, assault is hubris for sure. But then he remembers himself, and he squares off and he says, "Come forward. The Horn of Anserinae, you say?"
Aye, Lord.
He sits back down into his seat, and he's kind of rubbing his chin. But in truth, I've not heard of this horn, but just legends told by my father. There is a woman here, though. Wenvild. She is very ancient. If anyone here in Tharbad would know where this horn could be found, it would be she.
Yes, I've heard that she knows much and that she once counseled your late father.
She did, and my father and my father's father before that. She's an ancient crone. No one truly knows how old she is.
Seems she is long-lived as the elf kid.
There's whispers that she is a descendant of the Dunedain.
He gives like a at that, like, oh yeah, whatever. People have been talking about that kind of stuff. He doesn't put too much stock into it.
Right. He stands up and he says, well, I will offer you the hospitality of my house, and in the morning we shall travel and see Wenveld, and you will ask your questions and get your answers.
You have my thanks, Lord Seaway. The folk who spoke ill of you, I see, were wrong. You are a grand host, a helpful lord, and have the respect of me and my wandering companion.
As you get halfway through that, he just waves it off, and he says, "It is too late for flowery speech. Bed wherever you want. Help to yourselves to any drink or food, and we shall see this in the morning." And he nods to you. Moira, and then he turns to go back to his chambers.
Moira has been watching all this with absolute fascination. She's grown up just among common people, and she can deal with men in a tavern fine, but to speak to a lord and to play to his pride, and it just seems like the game of chess that she can't quite understand. And there's a new respect in her eyes at the end of it all.
Perfect. And this is where we'll end this prologue session of The Exile and the Night. Well played, guys.
Thanks, man. That's good.
Thanks.
And for anyone watching, I know Carol was watching, and anyone that might watch this in the future, I hope you enjoy it. And we're out.